Hi everyone, my name is Ben Cull. I'm a solution architect here at SSW, and I'd like to take you through a quick code review I've done of the latest application from our FireBootCampers, SSW TimePRO Invoicing. Let's check it out. Now the invoicing application is mainly a wrapper over the API, so a lot of the work is done in the UI. So we have one web UI project. We have a test project there to make sure that that UI works correctly. And then we also depend on a few extensions that help us map between model classes. Taking a look at the architecture of this application, we can see that the documentation is sitting up here in the documentation folder. That's quite good having that there. We have the standard web application. Now, a couple of improvements to do here would be to remove the empty folders, such as scaffolding, and there's a few empty folders in the views section here. Now, taking a look at the scripts folder where the bulk of the application sits, we can see that the root of our Angular application is sitting under scripts. Normally I would put that up in the root of the application, as that's where the bulk of our code is going. It is broken up into features rather than types of files, which is quite nice to see. We've got a big long list of scripts here below it, which we could possibly improve by using Bower in future to manage our client-side dependencies. But for now, these have been added with NuGet, which is just fine. Alright, taking a look at the code itself, we'll start with the authentication system, which is using the latest MVC5 identity system, which is good, especially because we rely on TimePRO's API for authentication. So we can grab a token from there, we can store it locally in our own session cookie, and we can use the identity system here, which is quite robust. So that's looking good there. An example of something that needs improvement is the invoice controller here. This is an Angular controller, and as you can tell by the code, it is very, very large. In fact, that's 1256 lines. So I know that most of this code is setting up controls for Kendo, but I'd like to see that modularized so we can see what the invoice controller itself is trying to do, not just setting up controls. If we take a look at the timesheet factory, we can see some examples of where we have commented out code. And you can tell that this has been copied and pasted from a different factory because it's get all clients, which isn't really related. But yes, we should always remove commented out code, including this stuff at the bottom here. If we move on, it's also good to make sure that your white space is consistent. Here we have quite a few sections where the white space is just kind of all over the shop. It's a really good idea to make sure you're indenting. There's some more code that needs removing. That your indenting and your white space is consistent. It makes for a much more pleasant experience when another developer needs to read your code. And one good example of this is the category controller. If we can see here, it's not too big of a controller. There's always one line of white space between everything. There's no commented code in here that needs removing. It's an example of a good controller there. And a good comment with a to-do in it as well. That's good. Now, the last thing I'd want to just mention is have a bit of common comment courtesy. And by this I mean any comment or any log that you create, make sure that it's human readable and you put some effort into it, because especially in this case, console.log is readable by your users. So I just noticed a few spelling mistakes in this particular one, client search controller. I'd like to see that cleaned up to say why you're logging this. In fact, I would replace that with a spelling error as well. Saying something along the lines of the user is searching for search string or getting all clients for this search string. Moving down here, I would say a client ID has been found, colon, and then include the client ID. And down here, this one's a little bit better, except I would say no clients match the search string. So just be a bit careful with your comments. All in all, the FireBootCampers have made a great effort. Most of the things I'm pointing out today are just nitpicking and consistency sort of things. The code itself is quite well written, and you can tell that a lot of people have put a lot of effort into it. Anyway, cheers.